Last Pint Productions presents the New Way podcast. The New Way contains adult content, but since this is one of our special edition short episodes, we don't have time to record one of our comedic adult content warning masterpieces. I mean, we could have, in about the same amount of time it took to tell you we wouldn't, but we didn't. So there. Listener discretion is advised.
God help you if you use voiceover in your work, my friends. God help you. It's flaccid, sloppy writing. Any idiot can write voiceover narration to explain the thoughts of a character. Years from now, you'll be standing around a posh cocktail party congratulating yourself on how you spent an entire weekend locked in a room with an asshole from Hollywood for your art.
Everybody wants to be naked and famous. Everybody wants to be just like me. I'm naked.
Will you help teach me about this? What is it? A new way?
Hello and welcome to a special edition of the New Way podcast where we break down pop culture so you don't have to. This is one of our shorter, more bite-sized episodes that feature spotlights on locations, actors, actresses, directors, writers, and more. Less preamble, more amble. We're also still in the midst of the coronavirus social distancing, so I am here solo in the studio of Last Pint Productions, but I am joined via technology by Mr. Ben Wilson and Mr. Nick Santacroce. How's it going, guys?
Hello, thank you.
Malkovich.
It's great to be with you. That was good. That will make it to air.
What our listening audience didn't get to hear was a hilarious joke where, as Matt is introducing the podcast, I swoop in, taking the mantle of lead anchor to hilarious effect. However, Matt was not recording.
It was one of only a million moments in the podcast where Matt is in mid-thought and Nick interrupts for a joke of varying degrees of funitude.
Well, I thought you were gonna restart it. We would all just do it at the same time. So.
I'm just trying to get
sound like a cacophony of assholes.
The goal is to get us into the podcast in under a minute 45, and that is going to be reached right now. This special edition of the New Way podcast is focusing on the films of writer and now sometimes director Mr. Charlie Kaufman.
If he were to write a movie about the New Way podcast, it would be A Cacophony of Assholes by Charlie Kaufman.
This is, it would be the three, and subtitled A Cacophony of Assholes. And that's
true. That's true.
I have to be honest, I had probably the most fun prepping for this podcast of almost any of ours. I realize I have one thing I've missed of Charlie Kaufman's on this list that I didn't even know existed, and I'm so excited that there's.
Oh, is it the bit where he lip syncs to Mighty Mouse?
No, it's no. You're thinking.
Or when he gives the audience cookies and milk after the.
Yeah, that you're thinking Andy Kaufman, Nick. That's Andy Kaufman of Man in the Moon.
So the podcast is about
Charlie Kaufman. Yeah, it's a different Kaufman.
Can you give me like an hour and a half to watch adaptation? We can start right back up again.
Just hop right back in when you're ready. We'll be good to go.
Okay. All right. See you in a second, guys.
No, I Kaufman is one of the most inventive screenwriters working today, but it's also kind of amazing to look at how he cut his teeth before he jumped into movies, because he was a part of what I would consider probably 3 or 4 early comedy properties that are super underrated yet launched a lot of careers. He started writing on Chris Elliott's Get a Life,
listen, I'll let you guys take the lead for the rest of the show, but I would really like to step in here.
Yeah.
Get a Life is one of my favorite ill-fated TV shows of all time. It is batshit insane. You know how I feel about Chris Elliott. There's an alien in it at one point. It is so weird. It's the origin of Handsome Boy Modeling School. If you're familiar with
it, has the REM Stand theme song, which is great.
If you have not ever seen Charlie Kaufman and Chris Elliott's Get a Life, I implore you, and just imagine this was on Fox. I mean, Can you imagine turning on Fox and seeing this today? That would be amazing.
And Kaufman had a run with Fox. He also did The Edge, which was this sketch comedy show that was way kind of ahead of its time as well. They had Jennifer Aniston on it, Paul Feig. There was this show that aired on, and then it would have these ton of guest stars. He wrote for that. Then he wrote for what I think is the best sketch comedy show that never made it farther, which is the Dana Carvey show.
Dana Carvey show, yeah.
With Robert Smigel, Stephen Colbert, and Steve Carell, probably 5 years before any of them really hit any major stuff. Smigel was kind of starting his run up a little bit, but
he was good.
But Colbert and Carell were young men. The Daily Show was
nothing.
5 or 6 years away.
Dirt on the boot of Charlie Kaufman.
So then he does a couple episodes of a shitty show called Ned and Stacy, which we won't go into because it's a garbage show, and some pure.
That was Starburns.
We're going to talk about the Starburns collaboration coming up as well. And I did a Bronson Pinchot, wrote an episode of that. And so this is his pedigree, writing sketches and a couple of episodes of Get a Life and these sitcoms. And he comes out of the gate with Being John Malkovich in 1999. I remember seeing that. I remember hearing about it and being so excited because it sounded like the most bizarre premise for this guy figures out a way that he can go and inhabit the mind of John Malkovich, and he's going to invite people to go with him, and then it turns out
for 15 minutes at a time.
Yeah, 15 minutes, and they get kicked out of the New Jersey Turnpike. Like, there's so many things that are built in it that sound like they're just weird to be weird, and I think there was part of his career where there was a little bit of that, of just, I'm writing these things, but they all worked. Somehow they worked.
Wouldn't it be fun to be a fly on the wall when John Malkovich got that phone call?
Yeah.
Like, wait.
He said no.
Yeah.
I'm the
he
plot
said no multiple times.
I'm the plot of the film. I'm not in it. I'm the plot of the film.
Yeah.
And you want me to be in it. Okay.
It is such an idiosyncratic thing. And he's working with Spike Jonze, who he worked with again in the future.
Raised in Bethesda, Maryland.
But I don't know if you guys remember seeing that movie the first time. I got to the end of that movie and that last shot and the implications of the last shot of that movie, which we're not going to deal with. We'll deal with spoilers in this. These are movies that are old. You guys should go watch them. But it is a very dark ending where basically this man winds up trapped in a child that is being raised by the two women he had romantic relationships with, who are now in their own relationship, and he cannot do anything. He used to be able to control. He plays a puppeteer, but now he has no control, and he just has to sit as a bystander watching it. And he just keeps going like, move your hand, move your hand, move your hand, move your hand, move your hand. Like, it is such a dark ending. I remember being in the theater and people just not having any idea what the fuck was going on or what they watched or what the ending meant. And I was just like, the first time I felt good about like, oh, I think I actually get sort of some of the deeper shit that's going on in this movie. What was your reaction to it, Ben?
I saw it on video after it came out, but of course I had heard a lot about it. It was one of those things where it's just like, obviously I listened, or I heard the premise, and I was not excited about it because I was just like, oh, it's just one of those like really weird, pretentious movies.
This is one of them talkies.
This is one of them pretentious.
Is it in color? No, thank you.
No,
listen, if Ben Wilson thinks it's too pretentious, then
well, the irony is that in the midst of watching like 1930s pre-code film in the 1990s, I actually had a problem with a lot of the like quote unquote like indie films, like the big indie insurgents of the 1990s and how that populated mainstream.
Fuck you, Miramax.
I didn't like. There you go. Fuck you, Miramax. I actually didn't like.
I knew you were dead on with that, Nick.
I didn't like a lot of.
You can read between the lines, Benny. Why don't you calm down? Take a deep
I was
breath.
just gonna say I didn't like a lot of those movies, so I think I was anticipating something different. And when I started watching it, you realize 4 or 5 minutes into the movie that not only is it a very unique voice and has a lot to say, which isn't just Kaufman, it's also Jones. I think it was Jones' second film.
Yeah, sure.
It is that it's actually immensely enjoyable. Like it immediately draws you into this story, and you like care for all of these characters, and they're all flawed and bad people,
Yeah.
but you like care about them. It's very early in the movie that happens, and I was like, that's talent, because like
he was
5
a
minutes
very,
in, I was on board. I was like, I'm good with it. However,
think
you
about it,
wanna
Ben.
get.
Think about it. It's a very accessible bridge to the indie films that you so hated at the time. For people that maybe like weren't watching Miramax films, you know, like my mother could see Being John Malkovich or Adaptation, and it kind of gives you a taste of the indie films that were popular at the time, but accessible and really well done.
Well, and what's
It's
really interesting,
really well done is what it
and
is.
Really well done.
I think what's really interesting with Kaufman, and this is because he was one of the first writers that I got really interested in wanting to read the original drafts of his screenplays, and he is one of the few what people that actually has his original drafts, and they are jarringly different. All of the beats are there, but there are these very weird subplots and strings of things that go very strange, much like with the monkey in Being John Malkovich. That's like Elijah. There's like a major plot line with Elijah in the original script, and there's this whole thing at the end with a giant puppeteer that's like Satan. They're like, it's way over the top. So what Spike Jonze did, reining that in and finding the stuff while still keeping all of those crazy, strange things in it, even though Kaufman's stuff all made sense, it just was like way over the top.
It's almost like a Reitman Aykroyd sort of situation with Ghostbusters.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
just like this huge sprawling thing. It's just like, let's grab those good concepts and ground it somehow. Let's make sure it's accessible.
Or dare I say, a Harmon Roiland.
There we go.
Oh, there you go.
I
thought.
And I think what's really interesting to watch Kaufman's progression is working with these different directors, mainly Spike Jonze and Michel Gondry, who've all kind of put their voice on his voice. Is he's writing for the most part, and then he gets to Synecdoche, New York. I'm going to jump a couple movies ahead, and we'll come back to the ones we're going over here. But he gets to Synecdoche, which is a movie that I have a hard time with. There's a lot going on.
The pronunciation of the title?
Yeah, exactly. With the idea that Philip Seymour Hoffman builds a replica of New York to stage his play about New York, and now he's involved in scenes with women that are playing women he dated, but sometimes it's the real women and sometimes it's the stage version. He redoes scenes with it. There's a lot going on, and I think there's probably a great message and movie in there for Kaufman. But as a viewer, I remember just being like, he's better with a director. And then I've watched him now get better at doing what Jonze did and what Gondry did with his own scripts as it gets to something like Anomalisa, which we'll talk about toward the end of this, where I really felt he understands how to share his voice without going way off the deep end with some of the weirder stuff that he does.
Well,
And
so
the answer is stop motion.
Just as a note, Being John Malkovich was not the first script concept that he actually sold the rights for. That was actually Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, which apparently floated around for a long time. I think he actually wrote that script because he read the Chuck Berry's unpublished biography, I'm using air quotes, before and had optioned that while he was still working in TV.
What do they call it, Ben? The blacklist of the most hotly anticipated scripts?
Yeah,
the blacklist. It's the blacklist. It's like 50 most.
That was like number one for that year.
Well, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind was like a hot script that I think that they were trying to get made for a while, and I think at one point the rights shifted and went somewhere else. But
and George Clooney wound up making it.
Oh yeah, so actually that ended up being released the same year that Adaptation was, I think, which Clooney directed. It was Clooney's first directorial. It was his directorial debut, and it was an excellent movie in and of itself. But it's also interesting because I have no idea what the initial. I could see why somebody like Kaufman would be attracted to a story like Barry's, just because it was very. I mean, it's just bizarre. It's like this all over the. I mean, yeah, he hosted a game show and was a spy. You know, it's like the most ridiculous kind of concept or whatever. and it's about duplicity, which is a big role. It plays a lot of roles in his filmography as well.
Identity.
Yeah, and identity, and exactly like what makes, and also just being able to also occasionally pull a bait and switch on the audience where they think that they understand what's going on, but they have no real concept of what's coming. So I think that actually, I don't know what the original screenplay looked like.
Yeah.
But it feels like a more traditional narrative still, even though it tackles all those themes, than what became known the Charlie Kaufman film, which was the run of Being John Malkovich, to a lesser extent Human Nature. But I saw Human Nature in the theater. I saw it at the Miracle Theater in Tallahassee, and which was a Michel Gondry film. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, obviously, an adaptation. Being other ones that were big, kind of in that run up to Schenectady, New York. But there was that
Schenectady.
There was a point in time where
Schenectady. Right up.
Yeah, but there was a point in time. I think that over the evolution of while Nick and I were in school at FSU, where
I did not.
Charlie Kaufman was when we were a freshman.
We were in a band too. I don't know.
Charlie Kaufman wasn't a household name when we went to film school. When we left film school, Charlie Kaufman was universally considered the greatest writer in Hollywood. That happened over the course of the 4 years.
I felt like we came up with Charlie Kaufman, and he quickly became kind of like a model for what you wanted. Like, he found his voice. Now you find your voice. Right. You know, it's a high pressure time to be in film school with somebody like that kind of rising popularity.
His run is like unparalleled when you look at his actual his entire career. And Human Nature was not a big hit.
It's sparse overall. Yeah, but man,
Human Nature was not a big hit. It's a fine movie. I don't think it's not as flashy.
But one of the interesting things about Human Nature is Michel Gondry leans into Kaufman weird a little bit harder than the other directors do. The opening bits it's basically narrated by the main characters who exist within the story, and they're narrating in the past tense. One of the characters is dead. So it's showing him in this white room with like a white thing that's obviously like some sort of heaven or some sort of other alternate plane. He was just like, and he's one of the narrators of the story. And he's like, yeah.
Is he a reliable narrator?
I don't know about that, actually.
I don't know if there's any reliable narrators in Kaufman.
They're all unreliable.
At one point, like waiting for Godot style, like tries to leave the room and he can't. Wow. It's a very strange and very weird movie. It kind of lends itself to both of their sensibilities, and it's also just super bizarre.
Yeah, so you could say he was being Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
It's kind of interesting. You have Being John Malkovich, you have Human Nature, and then you have Adaptation, which is he reteams with Spike Jonze.
Adaptation, period.
Yes,
it's true.
For me, it is if you go back to our earliest episodes of this podcast, we talked a lot about Adaptation. It's a masterpiece from beginning to end. My favorite, what I love about the movie is how it came together from Kaufman's standpoint. So Kaufman, after he's gone on Being John Malkovich has made him a name. Confession of Dangerous Mind is probably being shopped around at this point.
Pop culture has given him the go-ahead to wave his freak flag.
A little. Well, not even that. No. More in the mainstream is now come knocking on his door. And
That's what I'm saying. We're giving him the go-ahead to proudly wave. Because
Adaptation plays as a straight-up parody of Hollywood.
Yeah,
as as a parallel.
But I want to go to how that script started. Right.
Well, that's what.
We'll get into. So he is. Basically, when I say mainstream comes knocking, they want him to write an adaptation of this book called The Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean. He sits down, he starts trying to write this adaptation. He can't figure it out, and he gets writer's block, and he doesn't know what to do, and so he just starts riffing, just like to like maybe find his way back into the story. This idea that he's writing his own version of adapting this thing, but now he's got this twin brother who exists that wants to help write, and there's this romance with the author of the book and the subject of her book, and all these things are happening, and it becomes this story that just blows out of proportion. Now, you would think maybe he went back and forth with the studio, right? It was just like, hey, I wasn't seeing where we're going. I'm going with this new direction, I'm doing this thing. No. He writes the entirety of the screenplay to adaptation and hands it in without saying anything. So literally, the studio is expecting a adaptation of The Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean, and they get this fucking crazy script where he's written himself in and a fake twin brother and all of this shit. And they're like, and he literally goes, I assumed I was writing my ticket out of Hollywood. He's like, I thought this was it. I blew my chance, and I turned in the script, and I thought I was over. Spike Jonze came to his rescue and said, no, we are,
I can work with this.
We're sitting on gold. He shops it out.
I mean, have you seen my music videos? I got this.
Well, he gets it. He gets to Streep, who to this day says it is the greatest screenplay she has ever been handed in her time, as far as she can say. They get Chris Cooper. They get everyone on board with this. The last one, of course, that has to sign off on it is the author, the author of this book, and she's reading this thing like, "What the fuck is this screenplay?" She goes, "Of course." And my first reaction was like, "I don't know what this is. No, of course you can't do it. This is, no, not any of this." And she goes to their speaking how highly of them. They didn't pressure her. They basically just said like, everyone else is on board with this and wants to do this, and we can't do it without you, but it's your, like, just do it. So she winds up kind of begrudgingly letting them do it, and of course sees the movie and is like, it was very tough to watch it the first time, but now she's a huge fan of the flick. And it really is just, there's so much meta commentary, and what I love is, especially if you ever watched that movie with someone for the first time, I don't know if you remember being like, I remember being in the theater and realizing what was happening, and I probably caught it too late, even like to realize that eventually the movie is turning into the Donald Kaufman, like the Hollywood version of the script that he was writing, and it's kind of and you're like, oh shit, we've changed movies, like we are in a brand new movie here, and they're gonna take this to the weird, crazy end of this thing. It's an amazing feat to pull off, I think, in filmmaking. It's not easy to do.
No, it's not.
No, although I will say, still not my favorite Kaufman script, which is Eternal Sunshine.
Yes.
And that goes us right into Eternal Sunshine. It's easy. It
stabbed
easy.
you right in the feels. But
yeah.
But before we move on to Eternal, I'll let you really, you could take the lion's share of Eternal. But like, adaptation to me spoke to me in a way where I saw that and I got a taste of it in being John Malkovich, right? But then I was at the appetizer for adaptation. For me, adaptation was at the time, and I've changed, my taste has changed, and my creative direction personally has changed since then. But at the moment of seeing adaptation, period, I knew that was like the voice I wanted to have. That was the story I wanted to tell. The pressure of wanting to create something great and creating something great using that pressure. I mean, look, you see that, and it's the type of movie that is maddening for certain people because it is exactly what they had been trying to make on their own. And I feel like adaptation was a salty sort of, I saw it and I gave it a begrudging standing ovation because it was one of those things that you remember as being like, oh, damn, if I could have been the one to make that or come up with that. That is exactly what I would want my film to feel like, and the ride to feel like.
Not only that, he wrote two a best supporting actor win and a best supporting actress win in the same movie. That is that if you ever argue if you cannot write characters well, that and for me, I mean, I know Ben likes Leaving Las Vegas more
Yeah,
than
no,
but
I'm with you.
I think it's for me my favorite Cage. Also, I did read when I was researching it today that
Well, I mean,
apparently
that's a debatable thing.
Yeah,
I like
sure.
Cage in both of them.
well, I think what's funny is so Cage
Well,
says
I'll-
that he said that he had to ignore all of his instincts and only do what Spike Jones told him to do in adaptation. And it was like, that was like, literally, and I'm like, that is the most honest thing I've ever heard in my life. Cause yeah, it does not feel like Nicolas Cage to me in that movie at all.
Well, look, to go back to Community, when Abed is taking the course on is Nick Cage a good actor or not, the homework is watch 8 Cage films sporadically throughout 2 weeks, spaced out by 5 hours, and tell me is he a good actor or not. And look, Leaving Las Vegas and adaptation for me are at the top of yes, Nick Cage is a great actor, along with, of course, Raising Arizona. But man, adaptation is a powerhouse.
It's so
powerhouse. Good. Yeah.
Sure.
It's a yeah.
Sure. I prefer Leaving Las Vegas, but
I'm not sure if that's a prefer thing.
Plus,
you know.
You're missing out one of the most important things about adaptation. It's the long-awaited reuniting of 3 of Con Air's greatest people with Cusack, Malkovich, and Nick Cage. So, I mean, really, we're getting the second best performance those 3 have done together in adaptation, after, of course, Con Air.
Do you ever think of like when you go to a hotel, and you're looking around and you see the hair dryer, and you look at the brand name? Do you ever think of that? You ever think of that movie?
I think about the phone. I think about the phone scene where they do the dial tone. More so. That's
no, I mean. Con Air. The
Con Air. I see what you're talking about. Yeah, that's
every time I see that hair dryer, it's like an unexpected reminder of that film, and I smile. I smile to myself.
So there is Ben. I cannot.
I hope you do the same.
And then somewhere in the distance, a Simon West gets its wings.
Yeah,
Simon West.
Simon West.
I love that fucker. All right,
and his Donald-like twin, Simon East.
Yes, Simon East and Simon West is very good, Nick. So his next, after the 1-2 punch in the same year of Confessions and adaptation, he comes out, and I remember waiting for Eternal Sunshine. The movie couldn't come out soon enough for me. Like as soon as I heard the idea behind it, and that was another one I read the screenplay. That has a very different screenplay. We talked about that ending a bunch of times in this podcast. We won't get into it, but Eternal Sunshine is just
I would say that it has a different ending, and there are a few different beats in the screenplay, but it's still pretty faithfully adapted.
It is the other than the interpretation of the ending, the frame story. It is it's very much it's Kaufman going as not crazy as he could, other than a little bit of the futuristic frame story.
Right, exactly. So, anyways, I saw Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind 5 times in the theaters, and so what really attracted me to that. Nice. Sorry, Nick's changing his visual background here on Zoom.
It's now Blossom from the TV series of the same name.
The Alec as TV.
I loved adaptation, and I'm not going to be the person who says it was clever for the sake of being clever, because it was obviously brilliant. However, I think that the one thing that it allowed him to do, which actually I feel like he's really good at, especially when you look at his history in sketch comedy, is it allows for the opportunity for caricature. Now, a lot of the characters in that were supposed to be a caricature, and you see an arc with a lot of them.
Yeah.
But that said, there's still characters that are bordering on that kind of caricature arc because they're supposed to play those lines in adaptation. You're not afforded that ability in something like Eternal Sunshine. You have to really get inside the minds of these characters and really understand where it is they're coming from. And literally, well, both literally and figuratively. And I've never seen something that I felt that had such a more bizarre context. Ironically, though, I feel like it draws more comparisons to Being John Malkovich, because you care about the characters and you care about even the auxiliary characters and sort of what's happening within their headspace and like what's happening there. It has some great absurdity in it, but it doesn't really affect the characters that much. And so I was just blown away by how you could take this sort of bizarre concept and really just make it this grounded human story sort of within the construct of that. And I think that that is the most impressive thing that Charlie Kaufman's ever done for me, is basically, which has been done since then. I think it's been done really well since then in a lot of different contexts. I mean, Cary Fukunaga has done it a couple of times now, but where you're taking this kind of bizarre context of everything that comes around the story, but you're completely populating your story with just believable human characters. And so you're willing to go on the ride with them wherever they're going to go. And I will say, I think that what Cary does in that film is slightly more impressive than what Cage does in adaptation. I think that maybe that's the reason why I'll say that Cage, if I had to pick between adaptation and Leaving Las Vegas, I'd pick him.
I prefer his work on The Grinch.
I think, listen, I think,
good, but doesn't everybody?
Listen. To adapt a childhood favorite character who isn't even a real character, it's a cartoon, and yet to still embody it.
First of all, I really love his work in The Grinch, and everyone always shits.
I knew it.
And everyone always shits on it, and it makes me so happy.
I'm being.
I love him in The Grinch. No, I think Eternal Sunshine has got so much raw emotion running through many characters in it, which I think
like the Grinch when his heart grew sizes.
Oh, I mean, and you look at Kirsten Dunst's role in that movie, Kirsten Ryan Kirsten Johnson III. You
From
look
Third
at
Rock in the Sun.
You look at her role in that, and she has a very important sort of plot point role in it, but that realization. That for me is honestly what took me kind of over the edge of that movie, because you're watching the two main characters and this love story that's breaking down, and you recognize all of those beats, and then you have this kind of this weird little villainous subplot with Dunst and the head of the organization, where she's like been an advocate of this process, and now she finds out she's actually been a participant in it, and the shit has been erased from her thing, and that idea of how much of yourself is removed by removing your memories of people. Is it theirs to take? Is it, and do you grow without having those experiences, which is a really fascinating subject.
Well, I mean, all of the supplemental characters, Elijah Wood, it's great actors: Elijah Wood, Mark Ruffalo, Kirsten Dunst, Tom Wilkinson, is the head of the institute that
and a
is
brief
in charge
David
of
Cross
people. but yeah, it's David Cross and what's her face is his wife.
Yeah, I could try to remember who the wife was.
It's not
Laura Kreitlinger.
David Cross plays actually kind of the comedic relief. I still love his one line because he plays Jim Carrey's best friends or whatever. And he's like making all that racket. And when she's like, "Stop, can you stop that?" He goes, "I am making a birdhouse." It's just like it's completely bizarre.
Oh, Jane Addams. Yes,
Jane Addams, yeah. But no, for me, it's a perfectly balanced movie with characters. And I admire the character work done in that movie so much. And that's one of the reasons why I like his directorial debut a lot, is because I feel like he carried over the character work. Structurally, not as great of a movie. Sprawling, kind of confusing. We can talk about it a little bit more if you want to, but
that's how do we pronounce that again, Nick?
Schenectady.
Schenectady.
Schenectady, New York is a little bit. It's a rough movie, like Matt said. It's a little sprawling. It's hard to get through, and it's indulgent. I think it's overly indulgent. It's hard not to be indulgent when you have those talents around you. Especially
it has
from
great scenes. There are great scenes in it.
It's a collection of great scenes. It's a collection of great scenes, is what it is. It just feels kind of sprawling and meandering, and I think that's the issue. And I know that I remember a lot of people were super split on it the year it came out. They were like, "This is an absolutely unmitigated masterpiece. It's the craziest vision of whatever." And then a lot of people who were fans of Kaufman's were like, "Yeah,
I prefer Williamsburg, to be honest."
I wrote.
Missed the mark.
Yeah, I literally wrote in my notes, because it's one of those movies that I watched and I'm like, It's definitely not made for me. I don't think I get it. I mean, I'm like, I get the pieces, but I just don't get it overall. I don't get the cohesiveness of it. And it's one of those, I'm like, I need to revisit it and maybe I'll see more, or I just won't. Like, you never know. And I think that's what you can see him kind of getting his footing through that. And then he comes out with his next one, although there is one in between. There's the one I had not seen.
Well, I don't think it's actually. I'm not even sure if it's been released. If you're talking about the pilot that he shot,
no,
for his show.
Well, no. So there are a couple of things he's written before we get to kind of the most recent thing he did, which was in 2015.
I heard he was attached to Cats too.
Maybe. No. So he did. So between Eternal Sunshine and Synecdoche, and then throughout which whatever he wrote. He wrote for a TV show created by Starburns himself from Community, Dino Stamatopoulos.
Wow.
Dino. Stamatopoulos. But it was a claymation show called Moral Oral, which I actually did watch back in the day. It's literally based on an old Lutheran kid show that used to air. And it's very bizarre, but what's great is that he gets this idea about claymation from this show and then winds up with this guy as a producer on his most recent movie, which is Anomalisa. But before we do Anomalisa, I saw in his filmography this movie called How and Why in 2014 with Michael Cera, Catherine Keener, and Sally Hawkins.
It wasn't a movie. It was a pilot of a TV show that never got picked up.
Okay, that's why I had not... It sounded really interesting.
No, I don't think it's ever. I don't think it's ever been. It's never been released.
Okay, because I was like, I'd seen everything on his list, but I had not caught How and Why.
No, he was developing a TV show, and made the pilot. An extended first pilot or whatever. With Michael Cera, a few other pretty good actors in it too. Yeah. And then it was never picked up for series. I think it wasn't picked up for series because it was supposed to be like incredibly expensive.
Huh. Yeah, it sounded like a weird, like a guy on a TV show, and the TV show was a alternate dimension, and there was, it sounded very Kaufman. Like, checked all the boxes. I'm like, yeah, that sounds like probably a Charlie Kaufman script.
Well, I'm sure, yeah. I mean, like, and also so I'm not sure what the parameters were that were surrounding that, or like that not being picked up or not going to series, but yeah, apparently. He did this series, but the Anomalisa was the follow-up, which was basically a very grounded, very interesting, animated claymation movie.
Nick and I watched Anomalisa together at the house when you first got here, because we had not seen it before. It's a really, really interesting film, and there's a moment in it that speaks to me so much that it hurt. Like it's such a jarring thing.
Also, I think boiled down, Charlie Kaufman is famous for his innovation to screenwriting, but what makes him popular and poignant is that everyone has that moment that he dials in and just plunges a vocabulary dagger into your heart. And if you've had a romantic relationship with anyone in your life, you'll have one of those Charlie Kaufman moments, right?
Yeah, this one, because I remember Nick and I were watching it, and I was just like, I crawled in the fetal position during this moment, and it was
brutal. He started sucking his thumb.
It's pretty close. So
lightly weeping.
The premise in general is done through this really actually very striking stop motion, and these faces they've done for these little kind of puppet creatures they've got in there.
The main character is voiced by David Thewlis,
Professor Remus Lupin, for you Harry Potter fans out there, who does a phenomenal job. But every other character that's populated in it has his same face and voice, but like they might do different inflections and things like that. But this idea that he's living in this world and he's become everything's become so mundane and normal to him that everything he sees looks the same, like out of the stuff. And then of course he works in customer service, and he's on a book tour. He's in Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio, and he's at a hotel, and he's trying to connect with this old ex of his, like the last person he really kind of felt this spark of a connection with, and she doesn't want to do it.
And also, Matt, at this point, we're watching this and we're thinking, they've invested a lot of time and money into making this a stop motion film, and the main set piece is a character in a hotel room, and like a Howard Johnson, and then a dozen hotel room.
And you're kind of waiting, like, why did they use this technology, whatever? And then you meet this new character, Lisa, and Lisa looks completely different from everyone else out there. Lisa is she literally is it's the manic pixie dream girl idea kind, but it like sort of personifies. She looks different. He's with her and her friend. They go to the bar. He's feeling these things with her.
Everything else is not literally black and white.
Yeah,
but it might as well be.
And she's got striking different hair, all of this stuff. And so she winds up coming back to his room, and they have these moments where he makes her sing a song. They eventually wind up sleeping together for the night, and then it gets to the next morning, and they order room service.
Well, they have
the room service scene
sexual intercourse.
They
sleep.
They
I don't want this to be an ambiguous big situation.
They bone, and she jumps his bones, and so he wakes up, and they have the room service, and they have breakfast, and she starts eating, and it's annoying to him, and the more annoying it becomes, the more her face starts to become less and less striking and different, and then it just turns into everything else he's been seeing through the rest of the movie, and that broke me. Like it legitimately broke me bad.
I'm pretty sure I told you at that point. I told you the story about the girl that used to be in my daycare, who would eat her food and she would go yum, 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 as she ate her food. And even as a kid, I thought that's unnecessary. Do you need to do that to make a noise? Well, it's not a bit. No one appreciates this.
As an adult, I've tried to come to grips with the fact that people are going to do things that annoy me, and they don't have to be on purpose on their part, and it doesn't have to be that I'm singling them out on my part, but I probably am. And there's always
I'm sorry.
There's always something.
You're sorry.
But like that, the turn of that scene is so relatable to me.
It's so real.
And I'm like, I've never seen that done like that beautifully in a film where it's just like, fuck.
Yeah.
And that really, I think, is what anyone that's into screenwriting or has attempted to write a screenplay has a very specific affinity for Charlie Kaufman, which is often fuck. Like, fuck you. Like, you did this thing that's so personal to me, and I write too, and I should be able to put things on paper and words into characters' mouths like that, and I can't, and you make it look far easier than it should be.
And sure you could. He just beat you to the punch. That's all there is.
No, it's worse than that. It didn't just get there first. He did it better. He got there first and better than you could probably ever do.
That's pretty much the truth.
Speak for yourself. He just beat.
How I feel about Michael Schur as well, in a very different way for the TV front. But yeah, and it's
sure
also like,
you do.
That's right. I mean, we literally just discussed everything that Kaufman has written. It's been 5 years since he's had a movie out. He's got
2 movies.
His next one's coming. I'm thinking of ending
Cats
things.
2.
With Jesse Plemons, which I love the idea of Jesse Plemons in a Charlie Kaufman thing, reteaming with David Thewlis, and some other.
Also, by the way, let me pitch this. What would you think about an Alexander Payne collaboration with Charlie Kaufman? Part of me thinks that Alexander Payne's too buttoned up to deal with it, but the other part of me thinks that might be a brilliant pairing.
Does Payne direct stuff he has not penned?
I think he's collaborated with people.
That's a good question. Yeah, he's collaborated with Tom Perrotta.
I definitely find a lot of crossover between their character work.
So
I think that would be very interesting. That would not be out of the realm of possibility for me. But yeah, I mean, I think, but also you think of any director, like And I wonder, I mean, Kaufman may never go back to writing for anyone but himself. That sometimes it's just how it goes and they're just waiting for it. But I would love to see him reteam even with people he's worked with or with new directors, or a young unknown director, and just have someone else kind of interpret. Because I like to see these interpretations of his work.
One of the other things I think is really interesting is that you also look at the people who have worked with Kaufman and how that has also shaped the rest of their careers. I don't think that Spike Jonze ever would have co-written Her if it hadn't been because of his work with Charlie Kaufman.
And Her definitely feels like a Charlie Kaufman.
It does.
Absolutely.
And so I think, and even to Gondry, who has done the Science of Sleep, has some very Kaufman-esque sequences and some very Kaufman-esque kind of sensibilities.
Kidding. I don't know if either of you watched Kidding on Showtime, but Gondry did a TV series with Jim Carrey and Catherine Keener, and there's Kaufman all over it.
Exactly. I think it's clear that you got to pair Kaufman with the right director, but when you do, Kaufman absolutely elevates that director.
Oh sure 100%. I think it's a symbiotic relationship, but you can see it all over their filmography, some of these really talented people's filmographies, as they go on. I mean, to be fair, it may not have affected the creative process of Jackass the movie for Spike Jonze as much.
You don't know that.
I don't know that. Maybe, who knows? Maybe Charlie Kaufman's a huge Johnny Knoxville fan.
Johnny Knoxville was the college story of Ben Wilson.
I mean, and Kaufman's one of those people that he doesn't do a lot of interviews, or a lot of mainstream stuff. And I've not really even sought it out because he's sort of just this mythic persona to me. But you also have to figure that the guy that cut his teeth on Get a Life and the Dana Carvey show is probably fairly similar in even though he's writing these elevated, crazy, high concept things, he's definitely in line with at least the three of us and probably a lot of the people that listen to this show. Yeah. Of just probably got some great.
I would bet money that Charlie Kaufman is a State fan. I would bet money right now.
It'd be very interesting to hear. I would love to find out what sketches he wrote for Carvey and for the ad. I would love to see specifically what were his 3-minute ideas. Because that's the one thing you don't associate with Kaufman, is that everything is very grandiose and in depth and well thought out, but you don't really know what his short form is like, which would be kind of interesting.
Quickly on a tangent, do you know what that was for Bob Odenkirk when he wrote for SNL?
No.
Do you, Ben?
No.
Bob Odenkirk's flagship character and sketch was the motivational speaker, portrayed by Chris Farley. That was Bob Odenkirk on SNL.
No,
part of it, but it was part him and Farley, because Farley was doing that at Second City too.
No, I'm saying that was his sketch.
That was his that he fleshed it out with him for SNL.
Yeah, that was his start. That was where he, cut his proverbial teeth in SNL.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive on Charlie Kaufman. We're going to be doing more of these shorter.
And then briefly, Chris Farley and Bob
Odenkirk. Will those be next time? We'll get more into those. And we'll probably have a Damon Lindelof one coming up for Nick to sink his teeth into as well. But hopefully you enjoy this. Let us know if you like hearing these kind of shorter form episodes. We like doing them.
Shorter air quotes.
Well, they're at 45 minutes versus an hour and 45 minutes, so they are definitely shorter than the last
my sister,
two episodes.
My sister will listen to this one. I don't think she loves Charlie Kaufman, though, but I'll tell her.
You might find a new appreciation. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next episode. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.